James Parker sat at the corner booth of a small, dimly lit diner, the kind that felt like it had been forgotten by time. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, sat across from him, her small hands folded neatly on the table. The hum of the jukebox in the background, the faint chatter of other diners, it all seemed distant, as though none of it mattered. James's eyes traced the cracks in the old wooden table, his fingers running over the grooves absently, the weight of exhaustion settling deep into his bones. He had been running on fumes for what felt like a lifetime. The past year had been nothing short of a whirlwind, one full of heartbreak, loss, and relentless struggle. It had been a year since Emily, his wife, had disappeared without a word, leaving him and Lily to pick up the pieces. He hadn't known what to do, how to explain her absence to a little girl who still called for her every night, asking why Mommy hadn't come home yet. James had tried to make sense of it all, but there was no logic, no reasoning that could fill the empty space she had left behind. Every day felt like a battle, but he had pushed through, determined to give Lily a life, even if it wasn't the one he had imagined for her. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee, the warmth of the mug doing little to ease the coldness gnawing at his heart. He had promised Lily a fancy dinner tonight, a promise that was small in the grand scheme of things, but one he had clung to. To James, a fancy dinner meant something other than reheated leftovers from the microwave. It was a night where they could pretend, just for a moment, that things were okay. The waitress placed a grilled cheese sandwich in front of Lily with a smile and a cup of black coffee for James. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Lily picked up her sandwich eagerly, her feet kicking in excitement beneath the table, her blue eyes sparkling with joy. "Daddy, this is the best dinner ever," she chirped, her voice full of innocence and happiness, completely unaware of the quiet storm swirling inside her father's chest. James forced a smile, the corners of his lips twitching upward, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad you like it, sweetheart," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. They ate in silence for a moment, the air between them thick with the quiet comfort that only a father and daughter could share. But then, without warning, Lily suddenly froze. Her small body went rigid, and her bright blue eyes widened, her gaze locked onto something across the room. James followed her stare, confusion knitting his brow as he turned to look. At the far end of the diner, a woman sat at a table with a man, her posture poised and elegant. She was dressed in fine clothes, her jewelry sparkling under the dim lights. Her presence seemed to radiate an air of wealth and sophistication, a stark contrast to the small, run-down diner that James and Lily had found themselves in. Before James could make sense of the situation, he heard Lily's voice, sharp, breathless, shouting across the room. "Mommy!" she cried, her voice full of pure, unguarded joy. The words echoed through the diner, and James's heart stopped. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor as his mind tried to make sense of what was happening. Lily had already darted from the table, her small legs carrying her toward the woman at the far end of the room. She ran with the determination of a child who had longed for something, someone, with all her heart. James's legs moved before he could even think, his chest tightening as he rushed after her. When he reached the table, he saw it. Lily had wrapped her tiny arms around the woman's waist, hugging her like she had just found her lost treasure. The woman's face was a mixture of shock and confusion, her eyes widening as she looked down at the little girl, holding her so tightly. James's breath caught in his throat as he took in the scene. His heart hammered in his chest. He had seen that face before. It was Emily, his wife, the woman who had walked away from them a year ago, the woman who had promised they would be a family forever, but then vanished without a trace. "Lily," James called, his voice hoarse, raw with emotion as he rushed forward. His hands clenched into fists, every part of him desperate to understand what was happening. But then Emily's reaction stunned him. Instead of pulling away, instead of pushing Lily off, Emily knelt down. She cupped Lily's face in her hands, tears welling in her eyes. "Lily," she whispered, her voice cracking, trembling. James could only watch, his body frozen in disbelief, his eyes filled with confusion, anger, and a surge of something he couldn't quite name. "Emily," he breathed, the name slipping from his lips like a prayer, an accusation, a plea all at once. The older man sitting across from Emily, someone James had barely noticed before, stood up. He had been silent until now, but his voice cut through the air with an air of authority. "You know each other?" he asked, his gaze piercing through James like he could see right into his soul. Emily's eyes darted nervously between James and Lily, and for a moment she looked like she might crumble. She was trembling. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is James. And this is Lily." The man, her father, stiffened, his expression unreadable. But James noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes flickered with something that might have been guilt or regret. "You left us," James said, his voice hoarse, filled with raw pain. "Where have you been? Where did you go?" Emily's face crumpled, her tears flowing freely now. "I never wanted to leave," she whispered through sobs, her hands reaching for Lily, brushing away strands of golden hair from her face. "I never wanted to hurt you, James. But I didn't have a choice." James's fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He felt as if the ground beneath him had been ripped away. "You didn't have a choice," he scoffed, disbelief lacing his voice. "You walked away from your daughter, from me, and you're telling me you didn't have a choice?" Lily, sensing the tension, clung to Emily's side, her small body trembling with the weight of emotions she didn't fully understand. Her innocent voice broke through the heavy silence. "Does this mean Mommy's coming home?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope, so pure and untainted that it broke James's heart all over again. Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks as she looked down at her daughter. "If Daddy will let me," she whispered, her voice filled with longing, remorse, and desperation. James swallowed hard, the weight of everything pressing down on him all at once. He had spent the past year being angry, being bitter, believing that Emily had abandoned them willingly. But now seeing the pain in her eyes, hearing the anguish in her voice, something inside him shifted. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost his family, his dream of what they could be together. But in this moment, sitting across from Emily, with Lily nestled against her side, Something cracked open inside him. His anger, his hurt, they were still there, but they didn't feel as heavy as they had before. What was more important now wasn't the years they had lost, but the future they could still build. Emily's father cleared his throat, his voice tinged with regret. "I was wrong," he said softly. "I thought I was protecting her, but instead, I stole years from all of you." James felt the ground shift beneath him, the weight of the past pressing in on him from all sides. He looked down at Lily, her face still full of hope and innocence, and he realized something. He had never stopped loving Emily. Not really. All the anger, all the pain, it had been a shield, a way to protect himself from the hurt of her absence. But in that moment, he knew that he had to let it go. He reached for Emily's hand, his grip tight and firm. "Lily and we don't need money," he said quietly. "We just need you." Emily sobbed as she pulled him and Lily into a tight embrace. For the first time in a long time, James felt like he could breathe again. The past had been painful, filled with loss and regret, but the future was still unwritten. And with Emily by his side, they could start anew. As he held his little family close, he knew one thing for certain. No matter how hard the road ahead
might be, they were going to face it together. And that was enough.